of the unknown and being able to wrap our arms around it. It's the mystery that we'll never actually be able to plunge into the depths of understanding of most things. I mean, even masters of crafts of certain things, like, say, ceramics. I'm looking at my my wickless candle here. It's made out of ceramic. I mean, you can make this by hand and kiln it, glaze it, paint it, all that stuff. I probably got those in the wrong order because I don't do ceramics, but it's a fascinating concept to me. But even artists who are excellent at what they do, even elite at what they do, they don't really dive into the ingredients of the materials that they use. They're not mining them out of the ground by hand typically. They they rely on somebody else to do that. So the curiosity of where that comes from can go on literally forever. Where did the materials to make the clay come from? Well, they came from the ground, which was mined by a mine, and the mine pulled it out with some materials, some tools of some sort. Well, where did the minerals in the material come from? Well, they came from, wherever they come from, geological advancements through time, and maybe, dead dinosaur bones moved in there, plants dissolved or disintegrated or, whatever. But it goes on forever and ever, all the way back until the very beginning of time, which admittedly no one knows how it started. So that in and of itself, I mean, I just drew that from looking at a little wickless candle here made out of, ceramic material, and I could go crazy wondering where this came from, not to mention how the machinery was constructed to extract the thing from the mine, the people running it, what about them, their lives. I'm curious how they ended up becoming mining engineers or machine operators or, front-end loader operators or whatever. All this stuff intertwines, and it comes back in and it begs a curiosity from us that, if left unchecked, could end up not serving us. But I want to go into some of the adaptive functions of interest and excitement, and chiefly what it motivates us to do. It motivates us to succeed. It motivates us to achieve things. We also use it to acquire new skills, usually in the pursuit of achievement. And I want to read an outtake from the book here, The Psychology of Emotions by Carroll Izard. And if you want to look him up, that's Carroll, 2 R's, 2 L's, and then Izard, like lizard, but without the L. And he quotes a person named John Henry. He says, listen to John Henry describe two of his hobbies. At one time I was interested in learning how to play the guitar. I knew I was not especially gifted musically, but I admired guitar playing very much and thought that practice would make my playing okay, if not perfect. After buying a guitar and working at it for a while, I felt that I was so inept that I lost interest in practicing, and that was the end of that avocation. So he was frustrated by his inability to achieve what he wanted to, and he quite literally lost interest. Now compare that to the next thing. He says, in contrast, there was a time in which the development of my tennis game, when I thought that it had reached a plateau. I thought I would never get any better because I couldn't hit a successful approach shot, follow it to the net, and volley effectively. But the excitement I experienced playing tennis kept me at the game, and with the help of some good coaching and quite a bit of practice, approach and volley became my favorite parts of the game. So he contrasts interest, which faded with his frustration, against excitement, which is on the other end of the emotion continuum of interest and excitement, and says the excitement of playing tennis kept him at it. So sometimes we can override some of our emotions with greater emotions on the same spectrum to keep pursuing great things. Interest or excitement as an emotional concept, as its adaptive function relates to us today, has helped advance us evolutionarily through the ages, so that we create better, more efficient products. We, maybe back in the day when we were all cavemen and women, we were building more effective houses. We tried to figure out how to plug the leak in the roof. More effective ways to hunt animals, that sort of thing. So it definitely had its advantages. And as Izard notes, the interest excitement gone awry can result in psychological problems and even pathological psychological problems. So, for example, during manic episodes, the level of interest that an individual is experiencing typically skyrockets. And so what we end up with is spiraling out of control, a complete loss of attachment to reality in some cases, where we go a little bit psychotic, and that's all out of this emotion of interest. But interestingly enough, and I do put an asterisk next to that, even when we're at rest, we are typically still emoting somewhat. And if you think back to the introduction of the emotions overview, I mentioned an analogy or a metaphor of two tanks of fluid connected by a common pipe, in which one tank would be feeling and the other tank would be thinking, and they would be either high or low on one side or the other, depending on whether you were in reason mode or you were in an emotional mode. When you're at rest, though, and I did say this, they don't empty completely. There's no such thing as a complete absence of emotion. There's no such thing as a complete absence of cognition. So what's happening is when we're at rest, what keeps us alert is the emotion of interest or curiosity or excitement on a greater degree. But typically, you're not typically at rest. Did I just say typically or not typically? Typically, we're not at rest when we're excited. We might be at rest in a classroom, say, or taking notes in a seminar or a lecture or a conference. We're at rest. We're fully engaged with our frontal lobes to learn stuff. But what's keeping us engaged is the emotion of interest. When we're at rest, we're looking around the room. We're taking in new sights. We're considering things. And so, of course, this can be overridden by physiological experiences like fatigue and hunger, where we no longer are interested in what's going on around us, but we're more interested in feeding ourselves or interested in taking a nap, for example. Hopefully nobody's getting that from me as I talk. But the idea is that interest and curiosity are so fundamentally tied to our awake state that's usually our resting baseline is we're in some level of interest at one point or another as long as we're awake. I am going to explore the happiness or the joy continuum after the break. And in the middle of the break, I want you to consider something about interest. And as you're driving or cooking or sitting at your desk or whatever you're doing, think about the things that are going on around you and whether or not you're actually interested in them or if you're passively interested in them. And then consider what the difference is. Whether you take an active curiosity, whether something flashes across your computer screen and you want to go Google that would be probably more active curiosity or interest, versus something where you just notice it and you go, I didn't realize that was there, and then you let it go. And try to discern for yourself. I'm not giving you any guidance on this because I'm not going to suggest one or the other, but try to discern for yourself what it is that intrigues you to the point that you want to pursue it more versus the thing that you just simply notice and then let go of. Because I think if you can delineate the breaking point there, what you're going to do is you're going to be able to separate yourself from the things that may drive you crazy, and you just always want to figure stuff out, like why did this person look at me the wrong way when I was at the store the other day? Well, you'll never figure that out. Can you also let it go with simply noticing it and then observing it rather than wanting internally to continue pursuing and figuring it out, which you'll probably never get to because it's a complete stranger or whatever, and you'll never know their motivations, and it may have had nothing to do with you. So I invite you to consider that while we go into the break, and after the break, we will talk about joy and enjoyment. You're listening to Noggin Notes. See you in a bit. Hey, we're back, and I hope that over the break you were able to consider the difference between the things that beg you to pursue them more and investigate more versus the ones that you just let go of. And I hope you found something interesting out of that. But what I realized I also didn't discuss was the function of interest as it relates to personal growth and development. When we are nourished in our interest and curiosity by healthy upbringings, what it does is it tends to develop our cognitive abilities a lot faster and more robustly too. Versus if you're raised in an environment where maybe socioeconomic factors were limiting the ability to connect with different resources like books and so forth. Maybe you found yourself a little bit stunted. The cool thing is that we can always grow our brain capacity. And if you're interested in that stuff now and you're hearing this maybe as an adult, or maybe you're a child in one of those situations where you're aware that you're a little bit deprived of resources, don't worry about that too much. You can always continue to grow your brain through the emotion of interest. If you're interested in something, you can pursue it. Knowledge is always out there. Knowledge is ever present, and education can be pursued at any moment in your life. So don't worry too much about that. If you think that you're disadvantaged right now, you won't be forever, and maybe just the interest in how you get out of that situation is enough to propel you forward. So keep the faith. And then one other thing I forgot to mention was that interest is the emotion that overrides pain a lot of times, and I'm talking physiological pain. So if you're an athlete and you're playing sports and you twist your ankle, but you want to keep pursuing through the play or whatever, the interest or the excitement of finishing that can override the pain response. And similarly with children, if they stub their toe, slam their finger, touch a hot stove and get burnt, you can distract those children oftentimes by dangling something in front of them or pointing their attention elsewhere, and it makes them curious about something such that it focuses their attention away from the pain and onto the thing that you've placed in front of them. So keep that in mind. It's a temporary intercession to that pain. Obviously, if you burn your finger, the blister is going to hurt for days, not just a few seconds. But the idea is that you can at least draw their attention away, or you can draw your own attention away from your pain long enough to gather your thoughts and take action and go seek medical care. So I wanted to move on to the emotion of joy, and it's on a continuum of joy to enjoyment. So at the very large end of happiness, we have pure bliss, and at the low end we have, I guess you'd call it, contentment, where you're just cool, everything's fine, and the function of this emotion is to tell us that we're getting what we want, and we're doing things the way that works for us, and to more or less just keep it moving. And what Izzard talks about is how happiness or joy interacts with other emotions and with perception, cognition, and action. So it can slow down your performance, but it also can create a kind of openness and receptivity associated with being creative and being aware. And this is important because if we're really unhappy, if we're stuck in the doldrums and we're not experiencing joy, we're not really open to feedback. And I'm sure that you've all experienced that on some level or another, where you're bumming around, you're kicking rocks, and people are just trying to get you up, and you're just not hearing them. Versus if you're in a happy state, you're up for anything. You're willing to try stuff. So joy and interest play together really well in the brain and psychologically speaking. Now, some people do experience conflict between excitement and joy because they're trying to figure out, whether it's important to be at peace, which is more of a state of happiness or bliss, versus continue pursuing things which could then feed that happiness. And from there, I want to segue into an article that I wrote a couple of years back called Don't Pursue Happiness. And it sounds, I purposely titled it that because I think it grabs the reader's attention. But the idea is that you don't want to pursue happiness or really any emotion, because inevitably it'll lead to disappointment, which is sadness. And we already covered that in the last podcast. Because emotion always ends, and happiness or joy is an emotion, and by its very nature, it will end. It only lasts a few seconds in the brain, unless, like I've mentioned, you purposely focus your attention on those things for which you're grateful, for those things, on those things for which you're happy. So things that you make yourself happy will allow you to be in moments of happiness as long as you focus on them. So the idea is that if we focus on what we have presently, and I mean like right now, however long that may be, then choosing to find value and meaning in it, what you'll get is you'll find the same joy. The only difference is that you take the pursuit out of the equation and you direct your attention to what you currently have or experience. Now, if you're one of those people who are like, I don't have anything in my life to be happy for, I would invite you to scale back your expectations a little bit, and especially if you're listening to this podcast, you at least have the technology to access it. So there's something for which you can be grateful. Not everybody does in this world. And if your standards are set so high that you just expect these things like technology, the internet, podcasts, brilliant therapists from Reno, Nevada saying awesome things about emotion into your ear. Totally kidding, by the way. I don't think that highly of myself. But if that's your baseline expectation, then you start to take things for granted, and then you will lose out on that ability to experience joy or contentment or even pure happiness, because your eyesight is set so high that everything that you experienced getting to where you are has now been more or less thrown away, taken for granted, or just ignored in some cases. So we want to have a mindset of gratitude, because that'll bring joy into our lives when we're grateful for the things that we have, especially the things that are like, blessings that we didn't expect. That can also generate excitement. And when we notice that stuff and we live in the present moment, we can experience life fully